Welcome to What the Paper Said, in which I, Patrick Crozier, skim through the Times from 100 years ago, read some of the articles and comment on the ones I find interesting. In this episode, the week ending the 12th of November 1922, very little happens in the general election campaign. Sir Almeric Fitzroy gets off. The Times has the scoop on Mussolini's plans for the railways. Erskine Childers gets caught with something a bit illegal. And a young boy finds that his pants are literally on fire. The most important thing that's going on in this week is the general election. That's the British general election, which will reach its anticlimax next Wednesday. That's Wednesday the 15th of November. The Prime Minister, Bonar Law, during this week made a speech. Well, I think he made several speeches, but anyway, this is the speech I paid some attention to. He pronounced a lot of words and said very little. Although talking about Ireland, he did issue this hostage to fortune. This is from Monday the 6th of November. Things are going on which we all abhor, but my opinion is that there is a growing feeling in Ireland that they must have peace, that they can only have it by the treaty. He means the treaty between Britain and Ireland. And there is becoming a public opinion behind the policy it contains. Yeah, I got some bad news on that one. About the only thing that I can find that is interesting. I mean, and most of these articles are about who is fighting whom in whatever constituency, and usually those people are people we've never heard of, will never make any great impact on the world, so it doesn't really matter, and just isn't interesting today. Anyway, here are two figures who are still talked about. This is from Thursday the 9th of November. Sir, it's a letter to the Times, by the way. Sir, I have read Mr. H.G. Wells's address in connection with the University of London election, and am astonished to see that the notice on it required by statute as to the printer and publisher states that the address is published by H. Finer for the London School of Economics, Clare Market, London, WC2. I need hardly say that this notice is without foundation and incorrect. On inquiry I find that it was placed by the printer upon the document without any authorization and was unfortunately not corrected in proof by Mr. Wells's agent. The School of Economics is in no sense responsible for the candidature either of Mr. Wells or of any other person seeking election in London or elsewhere. And it's signed, Yours faithfully, W. H. Beveridge, Director of the London School of Economics and Political Science. I think everyone's heard of H.G. Wells. You've heard of him, haven't you? And I think most people have heard of W. H. Beveridge. In case you don't know, he was the man who, pretty much founded the welfare state in Britain, for better or for worse. In a couple of previous episodes, I have covered the case of Sir Almeric Fitzroy. Here he is again. This is from the Saturday, the 11th of November. The appeal of Sir Almeric Fitzroy, Clerk to the Privy Council, against his conviction and fine of £5 at Marlborough Street Police Court on a charge of wilfully interfering with and annoying persons using Hyde Park, was heard at the London Sessions yesterday before the chairman, Sir Robert Wallace KC, and a bench of magistrates. Without hearing arguments for the appellant, the court allowed the appeal and the conviction was quashed. The appellant was allowed costs. I find that astonishing. So no arguments for the appellant were heard. Okay. Anyway, the prosecution makes its case, and then this happens. The chairman at this point said that he had hesitated until he had consulted all the members of the bench, because many of them were anxious, having regard to the importance of the case, that the appellant would have an opportunity of stating in court his view of what took place. But the court were of opinion that there was no case made out, and so he, the chairman, had felt it necessary to intervene. He held that unless some person had made a complaint, a conviction under that section ought to be impossible. The counsel for the defence then made a telling point. A large part of the success of the defence case lay in proving that the chief prosecution witness, a Mrs. Turner, was unreliable. This is what he says. What would have been the position had a humble man been charged under the same conditions as Sir Almeric, who spent hundreds of pounds in order to find out the history of Mrs. Turner? Well, indeed. I'm I'm still impressed that Sir Elmerick managed to spend hundreds of pounds just in discovering that Mrs. Turner, had never been, was not a Mrs. That's the real point there. It's a murky story, and I won't go into the gory details. Oh, certainly not on YouTube. But I think all this does perhaps explain why this law no longer exists. On Monday the 6th of November, we have a story about Benito, or Signor Mussolini's plans in Italy, now that he's in charge. With regard to internal policy, it appears very probable that the state railways and the telephone and telegraphic services will be handed over to private enterprise, and that every effort will be made to bring back foreign capital to Italy. Certainly nothing that is good can be said, for example, of the railway services, and the necessary reforms can only be made if there is a complete change in the present system. The present deficit on the railways is a very serious burden for the impoverished state to carry. I don't think he's going to do that. I don't think any dictator worth his salt is ever going to allow, well, certainly not telephone and telegraphic services to fall into private hands. He'll want control over those two things. And they very rarely privatise. Almost no one has ever privatised state railways. I think the only person who really did it in any meaningful sense was the Japanese in 1987. For similar reasons, actually. They had a huge deficit that appeared, and they just wanted to end that. And it was largely a success. If you ever happen to find yourself in Japan, use one of the old or one of the privatised railways. In fact, it would be difficult not to. Actually, almost every railway in Japan is privatised. Now, I'm not saying that privatisation means you get a good service. I'm not saying that, but it's interesting that when you do privatise properly, not in Britain, not like the way Britain did it, when you do privatise, as the Japanese did, they did get a very good service. Not cheap, but very good. Anyway, earlier the Prime Minister, Bonar Law, talked about Ireland, and Ireland at the moment is in a civil war. They're having a war over the treaty. Some people think it's a good thing, some people think it's a bad thing, partly because of Ulster being excluded, partly because Ireland has been made a dominion, which means they all have to swear an oath of allegiance to the king. This might sound like angels dancing on a pin, given the success or otherwise of Irish independence. But here is some news. This is from Saturday the 11th. Early this morning, a party of national troops raided the residence of Mr. Robert Barton, Glendalough House, County Wicklow. During a search of the house, the troops discovered Mr. Erskine Childers and a man named Robinson, who is the brother of one of the formidable Republican leaders in the South. Much importance is attached to the capture of Erskine Childers, who ever since the peace negotiations in London last year has been one of the most prominent and subtle opponents of the Free State. He was the real author of document number 2, for which Mr. de Valera, Eamon de Valera, got the credit or the blame, and throughout the weary debates on the treaty, Mr. Childers was the driving force behind the well-organised opposition. It goes on. A later official report states that Childers was found to have a Colt automatic pistol in his possession. First of all, it wasn't a Colt. By the way, when we say a Colt automatic pistol, we also sometimes say Colt 45. But that's as far as I can work out, that's a British designation. American listeners will know it better as the M1911. I'm pretty sure about that. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. The point being that this is not untypical of reports you get. More importantly, whatever he was found in possession is going to prove really quite serious. But spoilers. And now to a new feature. I call this Stats Corner. I mean, as you read the Times, you often get just interesting statistics which crop up, and I think they're not stories in their own right, but just give you some sort of insight into what life was like at the time. This one is from Thursday the 9th. The City of London streets were unswept and untidy yesterday, owing to a strike of the corporation dustmen, road sweepers and sewermen. The men are dissatisfied at the refusal of the corporation to guarantee them a minimum wage of £3 5 shillings a week. The present minimum for adult male workers was £2 17 shillings and 5 pence. I thought I'd do some calculations, which is a dangerous thing, but I'll let's see how I do here. I think I've got it right. Anyway, £2 17 shillings and 5 pence works out at 689 pence a week. If multiplied by 52 weeks in the year, we get 35,828 pence a year, or 2,985 shillings 8 pence a year, which is equivalent, according to my calculations, at the rate of about 93 shillings per ounce of 32.1 troy ounces of gold, which is approximately equal, at the moment, last time I looked, to £48,000. Yes, if we are to believe that conversion, which I'm beginning to have doubts about, but is the best I know of, then street sweepers are being paid £48,000 a year. I don't think they're being paid that now. I'll tell you that for free. I don't think they're being paid that now. So what that says to me is the pound is seriously overvalued. Seeing as, spoilers again, sorry, that the pound will rejoin the gold standard, a gold standard, in a couple of years' time at a higher rate. In other words, you need fewer shillings to buy a pound, in theory. I have to say that's really quite frightening, and may explain a lot of things that happened after that. Of course, this week marks Remembrance Day, and there are plenty of articles talking about it. Here's a letter which I think reasonably sums up the situation. This is from Saturday the 11th, and it's from Sir Frederick Milner. Today, vast numbers of poppies, largely made by ex-servicemen, will be on sale in all our towns and in villages. Most earnestly I appeal to all those who benefited by the hardships and sufferings so cheerfully borne by our glorious officers and men, to remember them on this day, and to make some personal sacrifice so that they may help to relieve the terrible distress still prevailing among a large number of them. I can only describe the distress as appalling, worse if possible than last year, greatly aggravated as it has been by the vagaries of the Pensions Ministry in cutting down and in too many cases cutting off their pensions. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. My understanding is that if you were killed, your wife would get a pension. If you were left disabled, you get some sort of pension as well. And as I said, I don't know. But it illustrates the point of what the Poppy Appeal, the Hague Fund as it was known in those days, was all about. It was just about anyone could see why it was needed and who was going to benefit from it. Talking of which, here's another victim of the war. And this is from Thursday. On Dover's seafront yesterday, a 12-year-old boy named Carville of St James's Street, Dover, was seen suddenly to be enveloped in flames. Several large tubes containing a mixture of phosphorus had been washed ashore at Dover, apparently from a war wreck. The tubes are thought to have been used in the war to make smoke screens by vessels of the Dover Patrol which attacked Zeebrugge. Carville went onto the beach and put some of the mixture into his pocket, and as he walked onto the parade, it set fire to his clothes. Poor chap. And a reminder that the impact of the war continues. Anyway, that's all for this week. I aim to have something up next week, but I promise nothing.